Good morning. Welcome. Torah has preserved the story of Abraham, his covenant with God, and the two women who shared his tent, Sarah, Abraham's wife, and her servant Hagar. When Sarah couldn't conceive, she offered her servant to Abraham so that he might fulfill his covenantal responsibility and bring a male offspring into this world. The dynamics leading up to this decision and the resulting strain between these two women led the rabbis to choose this story to read on Rosh Hashanah. Feminist Torah scholars have taught that in the absence of words and explanations in the Torah, we have a sacred obligation to fill in those blanks. Today, we engage both Sarah and Hagar in conversation as we endeavor to do so. So our first question, Sarah, back before you ever knew Hagar, when you were still called Sarai, before you and Avram changed your names and your destiny, Avram first encountered God, and God told him to go, to leave the only land you had ever known, and travel toward a new destiny. Talk to us a little bit about that journey and how it impacted you.
Yeah. Grace Paley teaches that everyone, real or imagined, deserves the open destiny of life. But my life has never had any kind of open destiny. Avram was my husband. He led and I followed. His God was my God, not by choice, but by circumstance. His God said, get up and go. And so we went just like that, out of Ur and toward Canaan, to a land that his God would show him. And in turn, my husband would show me. But the thing is that Avram didn't stop once we got to Canaan. There was a famine in the land. And so he led us down to Egypt. And that's when I found out who he really was. Because you see, he told me, I know what a beautiful woman you are. And when the Egyptians see you, they are going to kill me in order to claim you. And so he looked in my eyes and he said, so you pretend to be my sister so that things might go well for me. Things might go well for me. And there I was, being led into Pharaoh's court, available for him and for his doing. And I just kept wondering all along, when did my husband think up this plan? Or had he known it all along? And so when Avram said, your sister, I was sister, and I wasn't his wife anymore. And when Avram sent me unprotected into Pharaoh's palace so that life might go well for him and ruin me as it would, I knew exactly where I stood in my marriage and in the world.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
Hagar, Sarah just told us about some of her first recollections of who she was before she met you. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about who you were and what your life was like before you came to work for Sarai?
Yeah, thanks for asking. My earliest memory was feeling disconnected. I was born in Egypt. I was told by the community of women that took me in that my birth mother was an Egyptian nomad, and I was nursed by many women. They took turns. Whoever had a free hand and extra milk fed me. And then as I matured and needed more food and outgrew my childhood hand-me-downs, the women who raised me couldn't provide for me any longer. And so by the age of 12, I returned to the familiar feeling of being disconnected and spent 2 months being traded from hand to hand, woman to woman, home to home, cooking and cleaning my way through endless days. Eventually, I was sold to a wealthy woman named Sarai, and she lived on a large property in the land of Canaan. And it seemed odd that she and her husband owned so much land, they didn't even have children. But there were many animals and to take care of, and so I was constantly busy. I was used to being alone without family, so I just slid right into my helping my new mistress.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your journey. Sarah, as we know, God features prominently in the story that you just told about your husband. Was God a part of your journey at all?
Yeah. I first knew God when I was shaking and alone, surrounded by the opulence of Pharaoh's palace. And in those moments, I knew that my fate was sealed. And then a miracle happened. Everyone around me got sick. God had sent some kind of a sickness to all the other people in the palace in order to release me. And of course, Pharaoh figured out Avram's deception finally, and he sent us on our way. So in time, as we walked back through the desert, back to Canaan, I guess I came to know my husband's God from a space of desperate gratitude. I came to know that because when all else failed me, my husband and everything known to me, God was all that was left to me. And it was in that moment that I realized that it wasn't just Avram who could talk to God, that I could too.
Well, thank you. And Hagar, for you now, how about your relationship with God?
Well, even though, as I said, I always felt disconnected from people, I've constantly felt enveloped by the divine. When I was a young girl and playing on my own in the Egyptian desert, God was always by my side. At first, it was like a child's play. You know, God was like my playmate, my imaginary friend, my escape. But as I matured, I came to know God intimately. God kept me safe as I moved from mistress to mistress. I was never abused, never taken advantage of. God made sure I never went hungry. When I'm confused and feeling detached, I sit still and tap into the divine within and around me.
That's powerful. Thank you. Sarah and Hagar, what do you two remember about the first time that you met?
Well, I'll go first. There are three things it feels like I was born knowing about myself, and they're that Avram was my husband, I had no children, and Hagar was my handmaid. Hagar, I can't remember my life without you or before you. And I know that men who later tell our stories say that you were a gift to me from Pharaoh, meant as some kind of a parting salve when I was released from that house. But truthfully, I left so broken. I don't have any recollection of what I possessed before or after. I just know I have always known you. Like Tamara Cohn says, perhaps we were just two parts of the same woman, because you have always been a part of me that I can't claim. And I've seen you always in the same way, lucky and fertile and protected and free. And so say what you will, it's how I've always seen you. I remember you as I remember myself.
Whew. Wow. I'm amazed at how you and I experience life so differently. I don't feel like you and I are two parts of one woman. You owned me. I was your slave. You were my mistress. I was never treated by you as an equal. You're living a delusion to think that we are one. We're not one. I clearly remember the first day we met. It was late in the evening. I was exhausted after a full day of travel. Upon seeing you for the first time, I bowed low and you didn't seem to notice. And in a hushed voice, you hurried me along and told me to sleep next to you on the floor. Avram was already snoring. You gave me a thin blanket and some water. I didn't have any belongings, and you didn't even offer me a change of clothing. That was my welcome.
Sarah, what do you make of what Hagar just said to you? Do you have any response as to your treatment of her?
You know, Audre Lorde, the great thinker and activist, once said that what woman here is so enamored of her own oppression that she cannot see her heel print upon another woman's face? And so I guess, yeah, my heel prints are on Hagar's face, but she stomped on me first. And don't forget that I've walked through this world knowing that one small move could mean that I'd stop being wife and would just be a sister, that I could be, according to Abraham's will, left on the side of a road in some forgotten kingdom to serve a pharaoh. So yes, with no agency and no options, there was no one left to leverage. And yes, I wronged Hagar when I told Abraham to conceive a son with her, but no one should forget this story. Because when you push me down and there is no other way to get up, you'll see my heel prints on the face of my sister. Here's the only thing I didn't think through, and that's when Hagar gave birth. Suddenly, I was below even the Egyptian servant. I was below everyone, and even with all of my scheming, I was back to being a sister, an exchangeable object, little more than a trinket worth holding.
Oh, come on. Once again, you're painting yourself as a victim? Incredible. You had all the power, Sarah. Yeah. She felt humiliated and she couldn't conceive a child. And yeah, she didn't turn that humiliation inward, but she turned it toward me. She humiliated me. You ask when things started going astray for us? For 10 years, I watched you, Sarah, and Abram trying to have a child. 10 years, I slept next to you. And month after month, you cried to me about your barrenness. I never knew my own mother. And the mothers who nursed me and gave me away, I didn't have any sympathy for you. I didn't understand your yearning for a child. You told Abraham that he had to sleep with me. I had no say in the matter. You treated me like one of your animals that you owned, a cow or a sheep. He was an old man. This time I cried to you, but I wasted my breath. Yet I conceived immediately. My stomach expanded and I felt the weight of the child. And as I got heavier with life, your life seemed lighter and lighter to me. I started to question why I was even a slave and you were my mistress. Why did we even have these class systems? Why are some lives considered holier than others? Perhaps you picked up on my existential angst and, as a result, lashed out. Do you know that you forced me to sleep outside with no protection? You decreased my meals to once a day. You forced me out in the fields with a heavy belly, working from early morning until evening. I couldn't take it anymore, Sarah, so I ran away. I ran back to Egypt. And as soon as I came to a spring of water, there was God's angel waiting for me. And the angel said, Shuvi, return to your mistress and submit to her hand. And the only explanation? I would give birth to a son, name him Ishmael, meaning God will listen, and that he would be the seed of multiple descendants. After that, Maybe I was a bit self-righteous, but it was 13 brutal years. I kept to myself as much as possible. And after you gave birth to that poor boy, Isaac, who could never stand tall in his father Abraham's shadow, that's when your venom flowed. This time you ordered Abraham to kick me and Ishmael out of your compound. You didn't even have the guts to do it yourself. Huh? I knew you were weak, but when you made Abraham do your dirty work, your true colors really shined through.
Wow. I mean, Hagar just told us that when she was pregnant with Ishmael, she made you, Sarah, an object of scorn, and that you lashed out against her. Do you think there was anything that Abraham could have done to assuage this festering anger that you felt during those 13 years?
I don't know. When I went before Abraham and complained about Hagar, in my mind, I was on my knees begging him, just fix this thing. Please tell me it's okay. Tell me you love me. Tell me you'll take care of me. But all Abraham said was, your maidservant is in your hands and deal with her as you think is right. And so you want to know if Abraham could have done something? If Abraham could have done something, how about anything? Deal with her as you think is right. Yeah, when I was done, I was done. I'd been done thinking for a long time by the time he said that. And so in my mind, this is on Abraham. None of this was supposed to be in my hands. You know, as I see it, that's what marriage is about. It was supposed to be in our hands, not in mine.
Wow. Thank you. Hagar, does this help you understand Sarah a little bit better, where she's coming from?
Please. When the going gets tough, the tough step up. And Sarah, you didn't step up. I was never a threat to you. You made me a threat in your own mind. According to the ancient code of Hammurabi, a child of a slave only inherits if the father claims him as his son. And you and I knew that Abraham never claimed Ishmael as his son. You wouldn't let him. So don't play the card of desperation and fear. By the time Abraham escorted me and Ishmael into the desert, you had turned him into an emasculated shadow of who he once was. Your so-called husband couldn't have done anything to step in. You didn't give him room to breathe.
Hagar, knowing your story, you were the first woman in Torah to speak with God. And as you look back on your life, is there anything that you've learned that you'd like the next generation to hear?
Yeah, you know, there's something called epigenetic trauma, which is the idea that trauma can leave a chemical mark on a person's genes, which is then passed down to subsequent generations. That we carry some biological trace of our ancestors' pain. Like past experiences of famine and war and slavery, they can reverberate through families down the ages. And I want everyone to know that your people, your Israelite nation, were the cause of great trauma. You enslaved me and my son, and in turn, my son sired 12 sons. And those 12 sons had many children and created an entire nation of people who never forgot how Abraham and Sarah abused them. The remnants of that hatred have never left us, and the residue of that cruelty has never left your DNA either. To think that this story was about a long time ago is naive. We have a lot of work to do. We have great healing to do.